Just do it when somebody like first gets up there.
Just so you just second.
I didn't even know that I had the option.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Brett did send an email about time keeping. Yes.
So we're going to finally do
You only need to be the one. You can just like a little bit further down. Yeah, more in the middle.
I'm ready.
Okay,
Time is
we
precious.
got it.
Does Jahan know there's a timekeeper?
I think she does.
She's on my side.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
What's the rule?
2 minutes to 30 minutes to get your legitimate sign.
He's going to start tugging on your sock.
Don't take it personally, but just totally ignore it.
Just gonna slam both hands onto the stage.
How much is the big stick? You don't even have to get out.
Brett, you should have sent an email so I knew that there was a time.
He's pulling your leg in.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'll give you a couple of seconds to get settled there. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a coffee and some snacks. So yeah, really a lot of fantastic information that we've already heard this morning from some of the ABMI's directors. This next section, we're actually going to be looking at ABMI's Evolving and how to meet emerging needs for everyone in this room and beyond, really. So I don't think anybody's left, which is good too. So I think we're doing an okay job here. So next up, we have Jahan Kariyeva, who hopefully is here. Maybe not quite yet. Oh, there she is. Woo, John. So, yes, as I said, Jahan Kariyeva is going to be presenting next. She's the director of the ABMI's Geospatial Center. Jahan is an environmental geographer by trade with a PhD from the U of A, not this one, the University of Arizona. A master's in environmental policy and planning from the University of Ohio, and a bachelor's in environmental geography from the Turkmen State University in Turkmenistan. So really, your education has been from everywhere. Jahan is especially focused on understanding socio-ecological interactions and how land use practices and management decisions affect ecosystem responses. Her expertise is driving the mandate of monitoring the effects of complex human-environment interactions on ecological processes at various scales across Alberta. So without further ado, I'd like to present Jahan.
Okay. This green, right? Well, hello everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces and wonderful to see all the new faces. Welcome. Well, since my slides are basically the first ones after the break, I thought that I'll start with some sort of ice-breaking exercise, and I'll go through some fun facts about Alberta. So basically what I was trying to do, I was trying to deconstruct the name, Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, using the keywords. So I'll start with Alberta. Alberta's area is slightly larger than the size of Afghanistan. But if you want to give another reference, you can also use European reference. So it's slightly larger than the total area of Germany and Italy combined. And then I'm also providing some examples on climate-related monitoring and water-related monitoring, with some hints where we're planning to go as next steps in the geospatial realm of the ABMI's work. So it was nice to learn that Alberta has the highest number of sunny days in the entire country, 312 of them. And there are more than 80% of Alberta's water supply that is located in the northern part of the province. This is how diverse we are, whereas more than 80% of the demand is located in the south. That's interesting, right? And then, of course, I wanted to finish the fun facts part with some fact about biodiversity. So I learned that the world's longest beaver dam is located in Wood Buffalo National Park, and it measures about 1 kilometer, and it was found using Google Earth, another geospatial angle. So there were several generations of beavers, I assume they all were family members, that worked on that since 1975. Talk about long-term monitoring. So as we learned throughout a good portion of the hour or two before this presentation, ABMI is a full-service research to action organization for all Albertans. So as Tara likes to call it, made in Alberta success story. You should all be proud about that. So we are providing monitoring research and science on the species habitat health and human footprint. But the key strengths of the ABMI that we always try to build the relationship, collaboration, partnership with others outside of ABMI. So like for instance, as Jim and others were presenting today, our key delivery partners like Royal Alberta Museum and University of Alberta, Alberta Innovates, and etc. So Tara will talk about some knowledge translation tools, how to inform land use and natural resource decision making. But I also wanted to make emphasis that to do that successfully, we collect, evaluate, and share the data. So it's all about being transparent. And we share the data on the species status and trends, and then species habitat health, and then, of course, human footprint. The most important information, right? And then information on land cover and how land surface changes over time under the land use that our province is experiencing. So although Jim said that ABMI's Geospatial Center is the youngest center that's been added to the ABMI's core family, I just wanted to make emphasis that geospatial information, geospatial data, always been a part of the grand vision of the ABMI's core, so related to biodiversity monitoring, so that we can actually implement our mandate. And we always kept in mind all those questions, such as like, how can we detect and assess changes in biodiversity and species health habitat while trying to use geospatial data to answer those questions? And can we observe the change, and how is it changing, how fast it is changing, and whether we can actually see how land use drives that change. And then one of the most recent questions that we started asking ourselves, can we differentiate that human-driven versus naturally driven changes that we observe in the land surface dynamics as well as in biodiversity? So with that in mind, I'll start talking about all the cool information that's being produced by ABMI. So keep in mind that I'm providing a very, very, very high-level information of what we do in terms of the geospatial realm. But I'll talk about two main programs that we have in the ABMI related to geospatial. So one of them is the human footprint. Don Page will talk more about some of the key aspects related to Alberta Human Footprint Monitoring Program. So another made in Alberta success story where government of Alberta and non-government organizations and then other organizations within the government of Alberta work together, trying to partner and create value-neutral information on the land use, so across the entire province of Alberta. So ABMI is a proud partner in that partnership. And then I will talk about a land cover information that's being produced by the ABMI, and that's a program called Alpha. I'll go through that briefly. So, but basically, again, just emphasis on how important it is to build on the partnership. We are building partnerships. We're working on in partnership with Government of Alberta, academia, industry, non-governmental organizations. So again, as the same as with the human footprint, we're trying to create spatial and methodologically consistent data, transparent methods, and open access data, and then sharing it publicly on ABMI website, as well as through other means wherever possible. So, and basically, we're always continuously working, trying to improve these two key products that are being produced by ABMI. So human footprint. So as of today, ABMI's human footprint information represents inventories that are available for publicly available right now on ABMI's website for 2007, 2010, 2012, 14, 15, 16. At the end of this fiscal, sometime in April, we will be releasing inventory for 2000 and 2017. And as I mentioned, one of the major progresses was that we tackled the temporal resolution. We now moved into annual production of the human footprint inventory. And as of 2014, we also have linear features available in the polyline format. So basically, any of the end users can take the data, like for instance, I don't know, roads, and calculate road density, total lengths, etc. Because in the past, ABMI been producing human footprint information in a polygon format, because the idea was always to calculate the total amount of the human footprint present on the land surface. So it's a very rich data set. Come talk to us. Branko is here, and his amazing team is here too, if you have any specific questions. But it's a large data set. Each of the inventories has more than 5 million features. There are a total of 100 feature types that are then broadly categorized into 20 human footprint types. And again, this would not have been possible to the degree that we have it right now without Alberta Human Footprint Monitoring Program. And Don will talk about that later today. So now I'll move into what we call ALPHA. So it's Advanced Land Cover Prediction and Habitat Assessment System. ABMI, for a while now, we've been trying to develop a system that will be complementary to human footprint information, so that then we can detect, assess and report all the changes that's happening on the land surface in addition to land use. So I know that we've been in the business of trying to capture all the things that's happening on the land surface for the past 10 years or so, like our traditional inventories that we have on land cover that were created with collaboration with the University of Calgary. So but what we're trying to do with this initiative, that's called ALPHA now, and it's about 2 years old. We've been working quite closely with government of Alberta as well as academia. But what we've been trying to do was to build on those traditional methods of creating land cover information, static land cover information. We wanted actually to tackle that near real-time monitoring ability, so that we are able to detect the dynamic trajectories and dynamic patterns that we can observe on the land surface. Plus, we've been taking advantage quite a lot of that, of the newly geospatial advances in the geospatial data and science, as well as all the tools that are now available to everyone. Most of the time they are publicly available and free. So this is just a very high-level infographics, and Evan and Alex, I think, will be presenting most of these products today. So, okay. So basically, ALPHA right now represents the system that is built on 3 categories of data types related to land cover dynamics. So the static layers, real-time, and historical. Under the static, we will have all of the sublayers that basically the traditional land cover types information, hard copy downloadable products, Alberta-wide wetland extents, for instance. Most of these products now are publicly available, the products that are listed here. Come check out ABMI's website, or the inventory of the permanent water. In other land cover classes, we are right now mapping some of the terrestrial classes. Hopefully we'll have some of the products available on ABMI's website by the end of this fiscal. And then the new approach that we're trying to tackle is basically trying to capture that near real time and historical dynamics, but through the web-based applications. So and then it's up to end user when they go and they identify the window of the temporal interest for them. And the products that we will have or already are building, real-time water portal and water attribution, historical human footprint regeneration, and historical surface water trends and climate. So Oh, one of the next big initiative that is partially underway is, as part of the Alpha actually, is the geospatial data acquisition, where we partnering with the Alberta Data Partnerships, and we intend to collect high resolution data that will be frequently reflown for the entire province of Alberta, that will support a number of the initiatives that we already currently have, and of course will open opportunities for further initiatives. With these slides, I just wanted to demonstrate one of the examples as part of the Alpha initiative, where we're looking into the human footprint regeneration. So, and Jen Hurd, she's here today. She is co-leading this work with some of our staff within the UFA, so like Branko Hritsko, Evan, and others. So basically, what they're looking at the regeneration patterns that we can observe using remotely sensed data, and then we can characterize using that data, but then also explaining the patterns that being observed by remotely sensed data by the science that's been collected on the ground. And we know that the forestry is the managed human footprint type that is actually regenerates and recovers. So this is one of the most perfect examples where partnerships and collaboration will be yielding quite fruitful results. Another example, one of our researchers within the Geospatial Center, Jerome, he is somewhere here, I can see him, so come talk to him as well. And the ABMI's Caribou Monitoring Unit, they've been looking into the enhanced linear features. So this is a next step into some of the work that we've already implemented onto basically attributing the linear features with some of the vegetation structure variables and metrics. But again, the intent is to support some of the ABMI's applications projects, as well as projects related to the needs and requirements from the stakeholders. So another initiative that is being called by Jerome and Evan and others, so looking at the reference DEM, so when trying to create information for the reference conditions, whether it comes to the wetland mapping, so basically when we would like to have understanding what was there prior to the land use that's happened on the land surface. And all this work is possible because of all the amazing work that ABMI's Geospatial team is doing. So these are the names. I won't go through the names, but I wanted to take this opportunity and say again, heartfelt thank you to all of the amazing staff members and to everyone who is making it possible. So outside of ABMI, all our partners and collaborators. Thank you.
So I forgot to mention as well that for this part of the presentation, we'll actually be doing a 5-minute question period after each one of the presenters. So if anybody has any questions for Jahan, feel free. And yeah. Nothing?
I'm here. We can talk later.
Oh,
We got one in the back here.
There's a hand pointing at a hand.
Oh, this is neat.
Forgive me, I got a bit of a cold, but I'm Johnny Lee. I'm my organization, I guess, would be True Stewards of Turtle Island. That organization, meaning I'm Indigenous. But my question is, I hear your partnership with government, industry, and all of that, and universities. But in my view, do you have any partnerships with any Indigenous organizations? Or do you get any of your information or share information or have any advisors from the Indigenous community? And just kind of an observation is that, but governments and industry are counterproductive to saving our ecosystems. They just pretty much, their policies are more economic based.
Thank you, Johnny. Well, I am an ecologist at heart, and my job is to present all the unbiased information related to biodiversity and etc. So my job is to collect that information. So, and I think it's everybody's belief within ABMI. And I think we are developing some opportunities to partner and work with indigenous communities, First Nations and Métis. And Tara probably will be able to speak more to that.
Yeah, I'll just mention briefly, thanks Johnny, I appreciate the question. When we did our 10-year science and program review, we actually had one of the advisory members was Matthew Whitehead, who was at the time a liaison for Woodland Cree First Nation. We just heard recently that he passed away, so I'm very sad to hear that because Matthew was in fact one of the, I believe, he was one of the real leaders in showing how we can braid Western science with indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Anyways, he brought his thoughts to the table during our 10-year science and program review. Also, I just wanted to indicate that we have established, it's a bit informal at the moment, but a community-based monitoring unit so that that it's helping us coordinate a number of projects that we're doing with indigenous communities. For example, McMurray Métis, Whitefish, Atikamekw First Nation, Cold Lake First Nation, Big Stone Cree. So there are a number of indigenous communities now that we are working with, and those projects will be community-led in terms of both the question and the design, and will focus again on knowledge transfer or capacity building. So we're really happy to be starting to build those relationships going forward.
Hi, good morning. It's Chuck Priestley. One of the strengths I think that ABMI offers is making the data publicly available. A number of speakers have referenced that already this morning. I'm just wondering if there's any tool available or some method of tracking how those data are being used by the public. Is that something that you're able to quantify in some way?
Well, we are releasing all the data publicly, but one of the other things that we're doing, we're releasing all the documentation metadata, so like how the data was created. And we also engage in a number of what we call external subject review processes. And then I know that Tara and her shop, they're building a number of the analytics tools so that we can actually monitor and understand who is downloading the data, how the data is used, so that there is kind of like a two-way communication. There is probably more that Tara might want to add, but like I know that that's been one of the requests to understand how the data is used, and then we got to the point where we produced so much data and so much information, plus we started using those quite efficient science to knowledge transfer tools so that we actually want to understand how the data is used. Plus, as an output of the 10-year science review, we need to engage more, and we wanted to see how the data, whether the data actually targets the needs and other requirements from the end users.
I was just going to add one thing to that, which is that we do use Google Analytics to see how general visits to the ABMI's website, as well as some customizations to that allow us to look at events, so people downloading that data. We can't really do any attribution very well yet, who's using that and how. We are developing a universal user across our platforms, which will then we'll have registered users, and we'll hopefully be able to collect more of that information. But we're really keenly interested in that piece of information, because I think it'll help us understand who's using what, try to figure out why they're using it, and then also understanding that perhaps those products and services, of course, that are more meaningful to people, what is essential to those products and services that we can build into other platforms as well. But it's a good question, and we're trying to collect that data more effectively going forward.
And I might add one more thing, because this is great. We found during the stakeholder meetings we had meetings with municipalities, energy companies, indigenous communities, a number of others. We started to hear in some of those use cases that we really weren't familiar with, and some others in the room weren't familiar with. So as an ask, if as a user you're finding high value in using information, the information maybe in a unique way, just send an email in to say, love to sit down and chat to say, we've got a new unique maybe application for how we use the data. And that might help us customize some of the tools as well. So thank you for that.
So if there's no more questions, I'm going to kick Jahan off the stage now, but thank you very much. So I don't think Tara needs an introduction as she just spoke this morning, but Tara will be now presenting on the custom reporting features and data platforms. And I mean, fundamentally, this title says it all, like how the ABMI's data can work for you. So we'll invite Tara back to the stage.
So I would just say this is the part of the work that I focus on a sort of day-to-day basis that I get really excited about. So if I start to get a high-pitched squeal in my presentation today, you know why that is. So yeah, the presentation title in your brochure really basically says custom reporting, making the ABMI work for you. I actually expanded this to really talk about all of our data platforms and how we're bringing customization into all of those, really again to meet stakeholder needs. So one of the things that I use this story a lot, so if you've heard it before, I apologize. But before I joined the ABMI, I worked for Alberta Innovates Health Solutions, and I worked in their performance management unit. And one thing I learned there, which was this concept of knowledge translation. So if you bring end users into the research question at the beginning stages of establishing a research question, and you make sure that the outcomes of your research are meaningful to end users, either by providing them the data in a form that they want, or by helping them translate outcomes into best practices, those kinds of things, you can actually reduce the time to impact of your research from about 20 years to about 3 years. So this is in the health field. And so this, to me, I've really embraced this concept, which is if we find the right way to provide end users with data, whether it be in the health field or in the monitoring field or whatever field it might be, but if we provide data in ways that are accessible to end users, that meet their business needs, then the research and the monitoring that's taken place before that becomes that much more meaningful. And hopefully we can have the impacts we're intending with that work much more quickly. So this part of the presentations today is really sort of talking about all of these data platforms that we've developed and are developing in order to really fundamentally provide data to end users in ways that meet their business needs. And in the last 5 years, we've really worked on, 3 to 4 years, we've worked on these 5 platforms. I'm really only going to talk about the 3 that are highlighted there today, the ABMI Data and Analytics Portal, WildTracks, the Biodiversity Data Query Tool. There will be a workshop today led by my colleague Jordan on ABMI NatureLinks, that citizen science tool, and we also have a variety of online reporting products as well. So a few years back, there was a lot of ABMI data. You might have found a bit of data over here, a bit of data over there. This is in terms of our website. And we realized that really what people need is to be able to find our data in one location and find it in multiple forms that meet their needs again. So in I believe it was 2015, we launched the ABMI Data Analytics Portal. Actually, it was 2017, so it wasn't that long ago. We launched the ABMI Data Analytics Portal, and this portal really has 4 modules. Data download module, biodiversity module, mapping portal, and the biodiversity data query tool. That last one there I'll speak to a little bit later, but that one is in development at the moment. The other 3 modules are available now. The data download is really where you can find all our raw data and derived data products, all the metadata to describe those, as well as our GIS data layers. So you can find that all there for download. The biodiversity browser is really what it sounds like. You can go there and find your species, your favorite species of interest, and got a lot of information on those species, for example, that we have complete data for. We have these, what we call our complete species profiles, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And our mapping portal is our interactive web-based map viewer, where you can look at some of the data products that Jahan was speaking about, as well as some of the products that come out of our science center, and really learn about individual species, for example, where they are predicted to be highly abundant, where they are less predicted to be less highly abundant, and so forth. Anyway, so here's the biodiversity browser. Somebody recently sort of coined this phrase. This could be really thought of as the Alberta's Encyclopedia of Life. There aren't that many jurisdictions where you can actually go and look at the data for a particular species that is jurisdiction specific. You know that data was collected in Alberta to help inform species distributions of the species we have here on the data browser, on the biodiversity browser. So you might find range maps for certain species across North America, for example, and those are definitely informative. But if you really want that place-based information for Alberta, this should really be your go-to location for that data. So in the biodiversity browser, you can see on the left there, you can actually just enter your species of interest, and you'll get straight to that species if we have data on it. Or you can look at the various taxonomic groups that we monitor on the right and click into, for example, the birds area to look at the species for which we have profiles. So if you click into that, you'll actually get like an alphabet picker, so you could just pick your species of interest based on the first letter that it starts with. I just picked alder flycatcher here because it's the top one. But basically, if you clicked on that species profile, you will see, for example, on the far right there, a map of the occurrence of that data. And if you scroll down this page, you'll find a variety of information. For example, species habitat association data, its response to various industrial activities on the landscape. I'm not showing you all of that information here, but what you can find at the very bottom of those species profiles is what we call these relative abundance maps, which in the middle map there, the current conditions give you a prediction of where we would expect high abundance of that species to be found in the province based on the habitat, based on the footprint in that region. The map on the far right actually shows what we call difference conditions, so it indicates where we would predict that there have been either changes, increases in the abundance of that species or decreases in the abundance of that species. But all I really wanted to highlight here is that for each of these data products on a profile, you can actually get the individual data pieces should you be interested in, or you can actually click on this button right here, the View Mapping Portal, and it'll actually load this map, one of these maps, into our map viewer and allow you to interact with it. So now I'm going to move into our mapping portal. I'm calling this version 1. That's our current version. We're just in the process right now of implementing a new version of this, which I'll speak about in a moment. But just to give you an idea of what the current mapping portal allows you to do, it allows you to bring up a different data sets. For example, in this case, we have all human footprint on the left, or we have the native vascular plant intactness on the right. You can pick an area of interest, the lower Athabasca in this case, or the grassland natural region here on the right. If there is summary information available, you will find that summary information populated right here. You can zoom in or zoom out of this map, and you can actually go down straight to the 1 kilometer squared pixel to take a look at the value of the map in that region. But we are on the process now of actually enhancing that mapping portal functionality, and this is where the customization piece comes in. So we heard from stakeholder feedback from some workshops we had in 2017 that I mentioned earlier. We heard that users really want to be able to do a bunch of things. They want to be able to, right now you're restricted to looking at 2 different data layers at once. Users want to be able to load and manipulate as many layers as they want. They also want to be able to identify custom areas of interest. So at some point, although this functionality won't be available right away, they want to be able to just draw on a map. We will talk about how we are building some more customization, but ultimately users want to be able to identify custom areas of interest in multiple ways. They also want to make sure that that data that they're looking at can be moved across platforms, and I'll talk a little bit more what that looks like in a moment. And finally, users want to be able to upload their own data. They might have their own occurrence data, they might have their own shapefile, they might have their own range map that they want to upload into our map viewer and take a look at it there. So all I wanted to say with this, basically a screenshot of our new mapping portal design, is that we are now implementing a new mapping portal to meet those needs. So in this particular case, you can see that there's this orange layer right here is my layers. So a user can really upload whatever they would like to and look at it in the context of the data layers we provide. There's also a variety of ways in which users can actually identify custom areas of interest. They can upload a shapefile, for example, or they can identify a legal land description. Another way in which we're responding to that feedback is now a user can load as many layers as they want to. Of course, you won't be able to see them all. Once you stack more than 2 or 3 layers, it's hard to visualize all of the layers at once. But we have a lot of tools that actually allow you to change opacity and color and so forth to do that. But you can, in fact, drag this layer, for example, to the very top. So you can move layers in the Z plane to be able to see what you want at the top of the stack, should you be interested. And now we can do multiple summaries of one layer against all the others and vice versa. So there's a lot more functionality built in here to meet user needs. All right, now I'm going to switch gears. And another way that the ABMI is trying to make these platforms more useful to users is by really supporting data integration. This means allowing third parties to actually use our software that we've developed initially for internal purposes for their own purposes, and building in that project management software and project management functionality that third-party users would expect from any type of platform. So I'm going to describe WildTrax, and WildTrax is a web-based environmental sensor network as well as the platform to support it. Initially, it was built to help ABMI and the bioacoustic unit. Alex McPhail mentioned before the bioacoustic unit is a collaboration between the University of Alberta, and particularly the Aaron Bain Lab and the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, the ABMI. It was initially built in order to help those parties process their own remote camera data and their own sound file data coming from autonomous recording units. Just to give you a sense of the kind of data that we're processing here, I recently heard that we are now managing 0.5 petabytes of acoustic data. That's 500 terabytes of data. So when you're getting into that kind of data magnitude, you really need a system for managing that data, but also, more importantly, processing the data so that you actually have meaningful data at the end of the day to support your analyses. Anyways, WildTrax has been designed rather to support these third-party projects and initiatives, and it facilitates multiple components in that sort of data management lifecycle that you would expect. So it does support the data storage, data management, data processing, and data reporting. So just to give you, this is not publicly available yet. It's going to be very, very shortly, within the next couple of months. It is being used by a few third parties already to do some initial analysis to sort of get some onboarding and test the system. So it's very close to public release. But this is just a screenshot here of the website itself, where users can log on and see the projects that they're managing, actually do transcription or data processing. You can learn a bit more about the sensors that are currently part of WildTrax. Those sensors are remote cameras as well as the autonomous recording units, but it's a modular system, so should users be interested in managing other data types that they obtain from other sensors, it is designed to be able to accommodate that. And there's a bit of data discovery option already down here, so users can come down and look at the maps. They can actually see where there are deployments of ARUs and cameras already in the province, understand who's running those projects, and hopefully soon we'll also be able to see some of the data that comes out of those deployments. So just a little bit on that project management side. Again, this is about meeting user needs. If you are a project sponsor, you can identify a project manager. So for example, I'm just going to use the Nature Conservancy as an example. Let's say the Nature Conservancy wants to deploy a bunch of cameras on their lands, and they want to either internally process that data or even bring in citizen scientists at some point to help them process that data. That project sponsor can basically create a project within WildTrax, create a manager to manage individual projects, and that manager can delete and add projects. I believe there's supposed to be another bullet here, sorry, and managers can add and delete taggers and transcribers. So you ultimately need transcribers or taggers to actually help you process data, so you need to onboard a lot of people to actually do that data processing piece. Just to give you a sense, the two data processing platforms right now, as I mentioned, exist for cameras here on the left, and ARUs or acoustic files on the right. Both of these systems have been designed to actually allow the time in which an individual would need to either transcribe a sound file or to tag a series of remote camera images to actually be reduced significantly. I won't go into details. Hopefully you've signed up for the WildTrax workshop later on this afternoon. But all I wanted to say is there are a lot of benefits to both sides of these platforms. On the camera side, where we've seen a reduction in per project tagging time, estimated at 90% reduction. This has to do with the implementation of auto taggers and a bunch of sampling approaches. We also have a two-stage quality assurance, quality control process to ensure accuracy of the data, and there's also easy data download. Just wanted to let you know that this interoperability piece, where users can push data from one system into another one of our platforms, is also where we're moving to in the next few months, particularly on WildTrax. So WildTrax users will be able to see their data within the new ABMI mapping platform. And finally, and I just have, I think, a minute or two left here, I really wanted to talk about this custom reporting, which is in development. So I really have some very basic kind of page patterns here to sort of indicate what the process might look like. But really where we're going with all of this is developing custom reporting framework for users. So what we've heard is users don't necessarily want to go to the ABMI's mapping portal, load up a data layer, focus in on an area of interest, get some summary information, and do this over and over again for each of the data layers. They want a way to be able to basically go click, click, click. I want all this information for my area of interest, and I want that in a downloadable PDF. So that's what I'm talking about, that first bullet. Users want to be able to obtain basic summary information for their area of interest. Users have also told us they want to know what are the areas of high value biodiversity in my region. So if I want to avoid a high value biodiversity area when I'm thinking about my development plans, or if I want to prioritize areas for reclamation, how do I do that? How do I use your data to help me in that decision making? And users have also said they want to be able to run custom queries. So they want to be able to take multiple data layers and see if there are areas shared by those data layers that meet certain criteria. And I give you an example here. Give me an area, for example, where seismic line density is below a certain threshold, that has good quality caribou habitat, and also might have a high relative abundance of a particular bird species. And again, users want to be able to just go click, 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 and get a PDF or a sound shape file at the end of the day. So here's what I call a page pattern. We've just started thinking about what the workflow for a user would be in terms of doing these kinds of more advanced queries or getting these basic summaries. We're going to call this tool the Biodiversity Data Query Tool, BDQT probably. We might need to come up with a better name. But users here will be able to do basic summaries, look at where a composite data layer that will indicate where these high value biodiversity areas are. Our science center team are working heavily on, working intensively on creating this layer right now. And then this user-defined queries where users can choose a variety of data layers and determine if they meet a particular criterion of interest to them. So just a really quick sense of the workflow. I've just opened up here the basic summaries. A user can identify a predefined, they can choose from a predefined area, define an area, choose a bunch of metrics they want data from, run that query. They would get the results over here. And then they can actually move their results into the cart. So they can run multiple queries, move all the results of those queries into the cart, and then generate a PDF at the end of the day. So this just shows you what the cart looks like. The cart looks like all of these queries or summaries you've asked for. Some of those you actually can see the results in terms of, an area of interest. You can see that in the mapping portal, and you would ultimately download that as a report. So this front end, this user interface is really in concept right now. But what I did want to say is the back end supporting those queries is something that the ABMI is already implementing. To do this kind of work, you want to make sure, especially in a web-based environment, that you can deliver results to users rapidly. So that example I provided earlier about this particular custom query, we're able to provide a user a result for that within about 3 seconds. So we built a database to allow for rapid custom queries, and hopefully we will deliver that to you soon. So how can we make the ABMI data work for you? Well, on that last piece, the biodiversity data query tool, one of the things that we will be doing is when we have a first prototype of it, we will run workshops. We want to make sure that this tool works for you. We want to get feedback in terms of the kinds of functionality that might be missing or the kinds of data that you might like to see in that kind of tool. And so ultimately, we want this to be a stakeholder-driven process as well. So thank you very much. Whoops.
Any questions?
Hi, my name is Brendan Hemmons with Environment and Parks. Down in Etsicombe, really tiny town in southeastern Alberta, there's one of the best historical museums I've seen in Canada. And in one of those rooms, you'll find a sage grouse. And they talk to how prolific it was in the era that town was in its prime. Sadly, it's not now. Take cash if you want to go to that museum. And we talk about that a lot internally, that people's norms are shifting so that when they look and say, well, there really aren't that many sage grouse around, they're not speaking to the history when there were. In those slides, I've wondered sometimes, when you're tracking species abundance, are those species running? Like, that's where they are now, but is climate change pushing them? And is that part of something you're looking at or your evaluations?
So yeah, I think there's multiple components to your, oh, sorry, I'll stand here. I realize I have a mic. I think there are multiple components to your comments. One is about the historical piece. So yeah, there's definitely shifting expectations that people have indicated generationally. One of the things that Jahan's group is looking at is, of course, historical land cover data sets. So making sort of land use change, to understand land use change as far back as the 1950s, I think will be possible. So I know that doesn't really speak to the numbers of particular species, but certainly we will start developing we will have some more products that can speak to that longer time series of change, at least landscape transformation, that piece. In terms of the climate change piece, one of the things that the ABMI, through that 10-year science and program review, we were really pushed to incorporate climate change as one of the drivers of change of biodiversity into our program, not just land cover change or human footprint. And so one of the ways we're looking at is how that baseline system that we have been running for the last 10 plus years will actually help us test some of these species models that we've generated. And so we might have a prediction about where those species are based on current climate variables. But as the climate shifts, we would expect those distributions to shift as well. And so we can begin to monitor those things based on some of those predictions. And we did have a project called the Biodiversity Management and Climate Change Adaptation Project, where they actually, the outcomes of that project did look a lot at how different climate envelopes were going to move different natural regions in the province. And Deanna Strahlberg, who I think is here, will be speaking to, oh, there she is. Well, she was spearheaded the work with respect to bird distributions. So really understanding what those predictions are based on different climate envelopes, and then being able to figure out how the monitoring system as it currently exists and how it will evolve will help us detect those changes on the ground.
Harry Stelfox, outdoor enthusiast. As we are increasingly being sensitized to technology, it can be a bit of a two-sided sword. And I'm really amazed, of course, with all the data and the data handling requirements and data collection technology. Are you running into any problems or difficulties with using these autonomous recording devices at ABM sampling sites in terms of privacy issues and that kind of sensitivity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Harry. I would say the sensitivity has arisen more out of the cameras because there are privacy concerns, not that there isn't with humans, with the ARUs. Basically anywhere where there can be human interaction with one of these pieces of technology, you need to find ways before you make it publicly available to remove those humans from either your camera images, or if you hear humans talking, you also need to remove that from your basically your data file before you can have additional processing take place. So on the camera side of things, right now we do have to do some manual intervention to remove humans from camera folders, essentially image folders. There is there are auto-recognizing pieces of software that we could use to do that, and actually that would be the better approach, so that there would be no interaction with a human of images of other humans. Similarly, on the ARU side of things, if there are human voices being caught, we do need to remove those as well. And so right now there's the bioacoustic unit is looking at ways of how we can, often we hear those humans at the beginning of a recording, so there's a way probably for us to identify when the humans stop talking and remove them from those sound files. But again, it'll probably be some kind of auto recognition process that we'll use to remove the clips where humans are heard talking. But yeah, we definitely need to be aware of that. And some of our partner organizations in Alberta, for example, municipalities, if they collect camera images on their own cameras before they can actually make that available to wild tracks for taggers to go in and do that data processing, they are required under FOIP regulation essentially to remove those humans. So these are the kinds of challenges that we're facing right now. We need to develop the technologies to actually help us solve those problems. But there are lots of other interesting dimensions to using technology. We also need to protect, for example, the location of sensitive species. There's privacy concerns around if people are taking images near their residency. those kinds of things. So all of those types of issues that we're facing, and we're trying to develop policies or technological solutions for. I think there's a couple more hands. Oh, sorry, Marcia, I didn't see you there.
That's okay, fine. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned the land species, but are you also I just lost my train of thought. Recording bird migration patterns, where they're landing, where they're occupying space at a certain time and then going further south or north, and First Nations information on uses of areas, plants, and animals.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Marcia. So Aaron Bain, who will be talking a little bit later about the bird monitoring program, I think he's the best person to be able to answer that question. So the ARU data, essentially if you have ARUs, a design that allows you to capture that information about the arrival of migratory bird species and then I guess the departure of those species, we can definitely capture that information. It's really about making sure the ARUs are positioned when and where they need to be. The good thing about those units is you can actually place them out in the environment. You can actually have them running all year round, and then you can collect the window of time. So you'll have that window of time where a migratory bird species might be in that location and be able to collect that information. The ARU technology, the science behind it is actually evolving quite quickly, where we can actually use ARUs to triangulate the locations of birds, which will hopefully actually help us at some point identify the actual number of birds in those locations. The degree to which this work is already done in relation to migratory bird species, I just don't know that. But Aaron would be a good person to ask, and he should be here shortly if he isn't here already. In terms of indigenous plants, information and so forth, we have a member of the ABMI team here, Christia Tabakaru, who's actually working with Big Stone Cree and helping that community do plant presses and create kind of a library of plants of traditional value to the community, so that there is that legacy of information as well as the plant pressing capacity and expertise within the community. So this is just another example of how hopefully if there's interest in communities to use some of these technologies or some of these processes, then we're certainly interested in working together and doing that knowledge transfer. Thank you for your question though. I think do we have time for one more or not? No, we don't. I'm around, happy to talk more.
I'm always the bad guy here. The one thing I just wanted to add to when Tara was talking about the mapping portals, like not only is the usage of them, fantastic for the end user, but they're really fun to use. Like I found myself on the biodiversity browser the other day, just flipping through all the different species of birds and the pictures and the information that was on there. So the graphic user interface and the user experience has been really fantastic. So I highly recommend checking it out if you get a chance. So yeah, really quickly, we'll just burn through this. Next up, we have Tyler Cobb, who is not only the director of the Processing Center here at the Royal Alberta Museum, but he is also the RAM's head of life sciences and the curator of invertebrates. It seems like everybody's got like 2 or 3 jobs here. So yeah, I'd like to invite Tyler up to the stage.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thanks everybody for coming. Welcome to the Royal Alberta Museum. It's my pleasure today to talk about some of the taxonomic challenges and some of the taxonomic opportunities that are really at the heart of this relationship between the ABMI and the Royal Alberta Museum. So just a little bit, this is really the outline for today's talk. I'll give you a quick background into the partnership between the Biodiversity Monitoring Institute and the museum, the function of the Processing Center, what it is we do here, some information on the importance of taxonomy and the taxonomic breadth of the ABMI program, who really cares about taxonomy, and then I'd like to then switch gears and talk about sort of beyond taxonomy and sort of unlocking the hidden potential and focusing on the importance of specimen reference collections and the value that they hold that goes beyond the data sets that they help generate. So the partnership was really operationalized in 2007 through an annual contract with the ABMI. So it's a long-standing partnership. And it's based on some core principles. The foundation here, strong alignment with principles like scientific credibility, transparency, independence, accessibility. And it's weathered a bunch of things, a couple of economic downturns, a couple of elections, and it's grown stronger over the years, and it continues to grow. The partnership is also based on the fact that the museum has a mandate to document the natural history of the province, and the ABMI does that in spades. The taxonomic breadth and the geographic scale of the program is really unprecedented, and so that made it a good fit for us as well. But the ABMI itself had no capacity of its own to identify and archive specimens, and so that's really what the museum's role is and what we're all about with this partnership. You've seen this slide already. We're one of the 6 sort of core centers of activity, the delivery partners, and so we're located right here at the museum. Our sort of main function is to provide the taxonomic and laboratory support for the program, and so we have a team here, 14 full-time taxonomists and technicians that are dedicated to the program. We support the training, the taxonomic training of the field crews, all the receiving, the tracking, the logging of samples as they come in from the field. Specimen sorting and preparation, species level identification is a key part of what we do, and also taxonomic research, and the long-term archival of these specimens for future research and also for verification or validation. And so really our job is to turn species or specimens into species level data sets and then archive them for future research. And we do that a lot. I've just managed to update this with the most recent numbers. This is just showing the number of specimens that we've processed to date in support of the ABMI project. And you can see that we're at 1.27 million and counting. And so it is an enormous workload, and it's a large team of people that's involved in delivering that. And we're finding all kinds of cool things. Just a few examples here. Almost weekly we're finding new records for the province, new records for Canada. Some examples here. New to science, Orbitella abmi. This is a species of mite that was new to science, that was described and named after the ABMI. A new liverwort for Alberta, the Drummond's flapwort. Just recently, Cheryl Tebby in our group published a paper, a new Curixid, a water boatman, a new record for the province. Corsella inscripta, it's new to the province. New to Canada, there's a new lichen in there. I just picked one of these examples based on its name. This is the sticky stubble lichen. This is new to Canada, never recorded here in Canada. And then an orchid as well, as an example. This is a new orchid for Alberta, dragon's mouth or Arethusa bulbosa. So more than 250 species that are new to Alberta that we didn't know about before the ABMI started its work. And more than 40 of those are confirmed as new to science. And so we're finding new things very frequently. Well, who cares? I get this question a lot. And so I use this example quite a bit as well. This is the rosy periwinkle example. You've probably seen me use this slide if you've seen me give talks before. I use this slide quite a bit. So who really cares that we're finding all these new things? Well, Linné in 1759 found and described this species, a fairly nondescript looking shrub in Madagascar with this pretty pink flower. And I'm sure at that time nobody really cared that he put a name on it. But then it's sort of a prerequisite to other biological inquiry. And so since that time, a lot of people have been paying attention to this species. It's found to naturally produce a whole bunch of different compounds, medically significant compounds, more than 200 in fact, mostly to protect itself from herbivory, to be mostly insects that feed on it. So it produces these chemicals, two that I've just highlighted here in the late 50s, early 60s, vinblastin and vincristin. These things were determined to be medically significant, very significant in terms the treatment of many different types of cancers. Acute lymphocytic leukemia, for instance, in children, vincristine was discovered that it basically cured acute lymphocytic leukemia in children, or resulted in a 90% survival increase as a result of this discovery. So it all kind of starts with naming the critter. The taxonomic impediment is a very real challenge, and what it is globally recognized as one of the most significant challenges to biodiversity research, biodiversity understanding, and what it boils down to is really that the need for taxonomic resources outweighs the availability of those resources. And so all of these different groups, the Global Taxonomy Initiative has really identified taxonomy as kind of a dying art. Taxonomic resources, like things like reference collections, adequate keys, funding, jobs for taxonomists, and skills, and jobs for them to build their skills in. And so this is really an important piece to not underestimate the value of the ABMI RAM partnership. This is really at the heart of that partnership, and the investments that the ABMI is putting into helping to build the resource side of this equation. So just to put that into perspective, there's that figure again, 1.2 million specimens and counting. So certainly the ABMI project is contributing to the workload side of the taxonomic impediment debate, but also all of these different investments, things like reference collections, helping us, the RAM, build its reference collections. You can think of a reference collection like a library of specimens. And so this is, as a public institution, this is available to anyone, and it's in perpetuity. Our job is to maintain and build and protect these collections. Other resources, things like specialized taxonomic equipment, the scanning electron microscope that we've just recently acquired. Other resources like taxonomic keys. This is an online key to the ore-batted mites of Alberta that's available through the museum's website. This is an important thing that came about as a result of the ABMI's work. So if anybody's interested in ore-batted mites, they can go online, download this, and identify them for themselves, or bring them in and we'll give you a hand identifying them. And probably the most significant investment is investing in people, in jobs for taxonomists. And so I don't think this should be underestimated. Allowing this team of people to build their taxonomic skill sets, share their enthusiasm for taxonomy, and so changing what is a dying art into one that's actually growing is an important thing to realize. It's a real benefit of the ABMI work. So moving beyond taxonomy, unlocking some of the potential of some of these resources that the ABMI is helping to build. This figure just shows some of the loans activity over the past decade, particularly just with insect specimens, but over 20,000 specimens have been loaned already to other institutions all over the world. We're helping to build other collections, so duplicate specimens that we get, we gift to other institutions to help build, to share this resource and build other collections, and to support other research. Also contributing to the DNA barcode library. So we're constantly using DNA as one of the tools for identifying these things, and so matching a morphologically identified specimen with its DNA barcode is helping to build that library, and it's a significant piece of the work that we do here at the museum, and with partnerships all over the place. There's a lot of text on this slide. I'm not going to read it out, but basically the point I'm trying to make here is that another piece of this is the training of students, of HQPs, highly qualified personnel. And so just a couple of examples of some of the student projects that we've been involved in, or this team's been involved in. With the genetic study of algae and fungi using the archived lichen specimens, we have a student coming in today from Duke University who'll be working with Diane Hoagland, our lichenologist here, on a PhD project, and many others up here. The reason I put residuals up there, the picture on the right there shows the apparatus we use for extracting mites from soil samples to support the ABMI project. Those soil samples have a lot of other residual material in it other than just ore-batted mites, which is the target group. that the ABMI is interested in, and we've had grad students working on the other material that's in those samples to help with their graduate project, and also to help us build our collections as well. So there's a lot of value even in those residual samples. And there seems to be a growing awareness of these resources that we have here at the museum. We have this fabulous new facility here, cutting edge technology, state-of-the-art lab spaces. We have access to the taxonomic specialists themselves, access to the reference collection, the georeference samples of the ABMI's metadata, and these things, there's sort of a growing awareness of the value that these things have that goes beyond the ABMI's data sets. And we're starting to see some spin-off projects. This is just one example I thought I'd throw up here. This is a group out of the School of Public Health here at the University of Alberta. Michelle Gordy, this is her graduate project with her supervisor Patrick Hannington. They were interested in swimmer's itch across the province, and found out through some of the talks that I'd given that we have this large collection of snails in our collection as a result of the ABMI work. Snails are one of the intermediate hosts for the parasite that causes swimmer's itch. And so they were able to work with the ABMI data and the collections that we have here at the museum to map the spread or the potential spread of swimmer's itch across the province just based on the locations of where the intermediate hosts were found. Kind of a cool spin-off project. No idea, we didn't anticipate this, but it's one of those side benefits. Probably the newest sort of exploration for us that's happening right now, and that's the use of archived lichens and bryophytes in our collection, and monitoring, and monitoring those for contaminants across the province, particularly in the oil sands region. So right now we're exploring proposed collaborations with different groups like WPIA and the Shodek Lab at the University of Alberta to look at contaminants in the archive specimens that we have, particularly with bryophytes and lichens. So it's a new development for us, and so probably some really exciting research to show at the next forum. So just to summarize again, the partnership between the museum and the ABMI is mutually beneficial. It's been going for a long time. It's very strong. Taxonomy is an important prerequisite to other biological inquiry. The taxonomic impediment is certainly a challenge, but through the ABMI's investments in taxonomy, it's also creating opportunity here in Alberta, so a made in Alberta solution. And archive specimen collections that we're building through this partnership hold value well beyond the data sets that they generate. Sometimes they're even surprising, like the swimmer's itch example. That's it. Thanks very much for your attention.
Let's try this one.
Thanks, Tyler. So we'll take questions again.
A defining moment in sort of my ecological life was being on a mushroom foray, and the expert pointing to a mushroom and saying, dig. And we dug, and there was a spiky ball, and it was a truffle. And the truffle was feeding off the tree. The mushroom was feeding off the truffle. I'm really pleased to see that work into fungi and lichens. I'm trying to connect it back to an earlier slide that, in an earlier presentation that mentioned that those aspects of the program have been dropped.
Fungi, yeah, fungi, early days we were looking at polypore fungi in particular. It's unfortunate that that group was dropped. I'd love to bring it back, but certainly through the lichens, we get a little bit of that through the algal fungal component there. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the different taxonomic groups that were chosen as indicator groups, fungi would be a really important piece. Everything's connected is the other point that you made right at the beginning of that question. And so choosing taxonomic groups to focus on is those are important decisions. And so they're not taken lightly, and a lot of care and attention went into choosing those groups.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Fuse Consulting over here. Hi.
Sorry, can't
Oh,
still
can you
can't
not see me?
it.
I'll just.
Oh, hi.
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 Sorry.
I hear you. I can't see you. Okay.
Just a
Hi, Sarah.
abandoned voice in the crowd. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's any interest in doing genetic analyses, like more in-depth genetic analyses with these samples. So for example, maybe you can look at things like population structure across different ABMI sites and things like that. Is that an area of interest?
Absolutely. I've had several questions about it as well, particularly for answering evolutionary kinds of questions. And so nothing has materialized yet, but there's been a lot of discussion about exploring sort of more of the genetics of some of the groups, particularly again with lichens, but with other groups as well. Yep. And certainly the work that we've been doing through DNA barcoding has kind of opened our eyes a bit to those tools as well, and how we can use them. Yep.
Hi, my name's Krista Burstaller. I'm a recent PhD graduate, currently looking for work, and I've actually...
What taxa do you focus on?
I guess kind of a follow-up question to what was just asked in terms of how many samples you're actually keeping in the repository. So I was using biomarkers in a lot of my research, stable isotope ratios, and cortisol analysis, and I ended up approaching a lot of museums that were keeping repositories like this, and there was some concern over destructive sampling of their archives. So I guess my question was, in order to facilitate some of these other potential data sets that we could be generating, are you considering the fact that some of these other techniques are destructive and perhaps keeping additional samples? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, destructive sampling for scientific purposes is something that we do. Our loans policy at the museum allows for that kind of work as well. So for instance, some of the DNA work, with insects, my area of expertise, you've got to harvest a leg, for instance. Damages the specimen, but then you get the DNA as well. And so certainly it's something that we do. In terms of the storage of material, the ABMI's work generates a huge volume of material, warehouses full of material, and so it's always a challenge for us, but we do keep everything. And so right now we are mandated to keep everything for at least 2 years. This has been going on for 12 years now, and we have kept everything. Yeah. But it is a challenge. It's certainly a constant challenge, storage of this material, and then care of this material as well. These things can't just be stored in places that you don't look at them ever again. They need to be maintained in areas with low humidity and pest control and things like that. And so it is a constant challenge for us. But that material, that residual material, is available for all kinds of research, and we've been using that. The mesostigmatic mite project, for instance, it's a group of mites that the ABMI is interested in the orbatid component. We also have all the mesostigs in there, and so there's been interest in looking at that group as well. And that's across taxa as well, not just the invertebrates. And give me a resume.
Hi, I've asked this question before, and it comes from a more First Nations spiritual idea, but I often wonder about the area and the energy of a certain area. So my ancestors, which would be Blackfoot, and we're to the south, and we've been here for time immemorial. So my ancestors that have died and have become the ground, have become the trees, have become, I often wonder what happens when you change that, and because we no longer are part of the soil, we're buried in a different way, so we're no longer providing nutrients to the animals, to the, how do you think that is changing the production of this, like how it's producing the animals, the plants? That has all changed now in the past maybe 200 years in my area. And those types of questions, I don't know who to ask or how.
Well, I'm not sure I have an adequate answer for you, but I'll give it a try. And the energy transfer and the respect for these specimens is something that we're all about at the museum. And so this isn't just collecting for collecting's sake. This is collecting for a reason, and then treating these specimens as artifacts, as objects, just like we would any other type of artifact, and protecting it for time immemorial. That's our mandate. And so, in terms of the impact that has on energy flow and things like that, I'm afraid I won't be able to answer that question. It's certainly something I think about, but it's not something I have an answer for. Mm-hmm. It's possible. So what I think at the core of that question is really the impact of collecting that material and not leaving it in that environment. And so, again, I really don't have an answer for that. My PhD work was all on nutrient cycling and you know, the effect of forest harvesting on beetles and that whole ecological cycle. But in terms of certainly removing those specimens or those species from the ecosystems, the roles that they play in those ecosystems and in nutrient cycling and energy cycling, it certainly does have an impact, and I could see that as well. In terms of the impact that harvesting, collecting information like this has, you have to weigh that against the benefit of learning more about these organisms. And yeah, I think the best way I can answer that is we're striving for that balance, trying to learn as much as we can.
Okay, great. So just before we break for lunch, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. It is our door prize. So I'm going to have Brett here hold the vase, and maybe Jahan can pick the lucky winners.
Brendan Hemmons.
Wow.
Woo. What do we have for them, Brett?
Well, Alex, we have 3 NatureLinks t-shirts designed in Edmonton by a wonderful artist, Amanda Schutze. She's actually done some other illustrations of t-shirts in the store here. This is a lichen drawing. We also have a t-shirt or a bird version and a flower, but we don't have those here today. We have a small, medium, and a large. So.
It's gonna be large. Thank you so much.
All right, so Jahan, you have to pick a medium next. That's the idea. Woo. I feel like that's, yeah.
Claire Edwards.
Whoa. Lucky number, winner number 2.
Yeah. Maybe we can do one more.
Okay. And now the smalls.
You can give these to your kids too. You know.
Louise Calator.
Ooh, that's a complicated one. Kalautar? Oh.
I just wanted to say these t-shirts are part of swag for NatureLinks, which is ABMI's citizen science application. We're going to be working with local artists across the province to develop local t-shirts to reflect citizen science efforts in the province. So this is ABMI partnering with the t-shirt community.
All right, so I'm sure everybody's feeling quite peckish right now, so we're going to break for lunch. We'll shoot to come back for around 12:25, 12:30, just so we stay on time, which is, I apologize, it's cutting the lunch a little short, but I think that should work. And we'll see you back here for opening up the floor to our collaborators. So thanks, guys. Oh, and if you get a chance over the lunchtime, there are the surveys just out by the registration desk as well. Thank you.